Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome all to the MEI, the Middle East Institute. And I thank you all for coming on this rainy afternoon, braving the rain all the way to Heng Mui Keng Terrace. But I'm sure it will be worth your while today. We have Professor Sumanto Al-Qurtuby, who is Assistant Professor of Cultural Anthropology at the King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. King Fahd University is, I'm sure you know, the best university in Saudi Arabia. This is because Saudi Arabia's main income is from oil, 10 million barrels of oil per day, and King Fahd University is a petroleum university, so they better know how to teach well in order that the oil can keep being produced in Saudi Arabia. So as a result, they take the best professors from all over the world, including Professor Sumanto. Before joining the King Fahd University, he was visiting professor and research fellow at the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, which is in the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, USA. He has degrees in anthropology, sociology, conflict, transformation, and Islamic studies. His PhD is in cultural anthropology from Boston University, and he has an MA in conflict and peace studies from the Eastern Mennonite University Center for Justice and Peace Building. So Professor Sumanto has been very involved in conflict and peace building. He worked in Ambon, where you had the Christian-Muslim violence, as you may know, after the fall of Suharto in Indonesia. And a lot of his work has been about conflict, violence, peace building, including intra-religious relations, the role of religion in the public sphere, and also the Arab-Indonesian connection. I think Professor Qurtuby is with us for 3 months in the MEI, and I think we are hoping that with his expertise in conflict, peace building, and so on, starting from Indonesia, we hope that he will, in the near future, be able to help the Middle East deal with issues of conflict and peace building when they are ready to do so. He's a very prolific writer, has written or co-authored more than 16 books, dozens of academic articles, and many, many popular essays in both Indonesian and English. He's also a columnist and a freelancer for media outlets such as Deutsche Welle, Jakarta Globe, Gatra, and others. At the MEI this summer, he is completing a book manuscript on Islam, travel and learning, Saudi-Indonesian Muslim intellectual networks. And this will be his talk for today. Saudi Arabia's Indonesian intellectual sojourners, Islamic scholars, scientists, and students. Professor Qurtuby.
Thank you, Professor Angsang. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming, and also thanks for me for having me here. And what I'm going to talk today is actually is part of my book manuscript. Actually, the book manuscript. How to the book manuscript actually now is under contract with IB Tauris in London and New York. So actually, this talk today is part of my book project that I am working on, and hoping that by next year I can finish the book manuscript. So actually, the title of the book manuscript is Saudi Arabia and Indonesian Networks, Migration, Education, and Islam. So I try to keep my talk short, so I'm hoping to give more feedback, criticism, and suggestion from you. So maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes for talk, and then let's open with discussion. This is what I'm going to talk this afternoon. Is about specifically about Indonesian intellectual sojourners. There are many Indonesians in Saudi, of course, including migrant workers, including professional expat, for instance. But my focus is in intellectual migrant. What I mean by intellectual migrant here is Islamic scholars and scientists, in hard scientists or social scientists, and then students. So, so this is what I am going to say this afternoon. So let's begin by the history of a very brief history. Oh, it's very small. I thought it's very huge. It's actually very small.
We can listen if you speak.
The history of Arab-Indonesian relations. Professor Eng Seng have been working for a long time about Arab Hadrami Asia connection. So, as if you are familiar with the studies of Arab Southeast Asia connection or Arab-Indonesian connections, what I mean by Indonesian here is quote because there was no Indonesia before 1945. So, but people commonly say, I say Indonesian is just to make much easier the discussion of our topic this afternoon. So, if we are familiar with the study of the network, Arabia and Indonesian network, I mean by Arabia is northern part and southern part. Southern part is including Najran, Yemen, and northern part, especially Hijaz, has been long contact actually between Arabia and Indonesia. And some historians like Dennis Lombard, for instance, and Anthony Reid also, Reclef also, have they even say that the connection between the two is actually long before Islam came into Indonesia. Islam arrived in Indonesia actually is about 13th centuries in Java and about 9th century in Sumatra. So Arab came to Indonesia is actually long before the advent of Islam in Indonesia. So this is to make sure that the connection had been going on for a long time. And so if we look at the history of Indonesia, for instance, there were very famous, numerous pre-Islamic coastal kingdoms in Indonesia, in Java and Sumatra and other places. So this is the main channel, the main channel of a connection between Arab and Indonesia. So the second point is about Hadramis. Professor Eng Seng, of course, knows much better about Hadrami diaspora in Southeast Asia and other places. But Hadramis also, Arab Hadramis also very interesting ethnic groups in Indonesia. They even if we look at my notes, for instance, Hadramis already came to Indonesia also long before colonial European colonials. If we look at the notes from the historians, and some of them even became sultans in some places. In Pontianak, for instance, I wrote some of them. Sayyid Ali bin Osman bin Shihab, for instance, became Sultan of Siak in Riau of Sumatra, and then Sayyid Abdurrahman Al-Qadri, the founder of the Pontianak Sultanate in western Kalimantan or Borneo, and then Sultan Abdul Aziz Shah in the Perlak Kingdom in Aceh in 9th until 13th century. So this is just to prove the existence of a Hadrami groups in Indonesia. So so the next point is the connection is also not only Hadramis actually, but also the influence of Saudi Wahhabism in Indonesia. If we look at the history of Indonesian Islam, in 19th century, for instance, the Padri movement in Sumatra, the Padri movement, actually the ulama, the Padris as ulama in Sumatra, actually had been strongly influenced by Saudi Wahhabi teaching. So there is a conflict between traditionalist and reformist group in West Sumatra. This is also to show the relationship, the connection between Arabia and Indonesia. And the next point, what I'm going to mention here is the flow of Arabs to Indonesia is actually became more fruitful actually after the discovery of steamship technology and the opening of Suez Canal in 1869, and then the connection has become the opening of a Suez Canal and then the discovery of steamship technology stimulated travel, immigration from Arabia to Malay-Indonesia, but also from Malay-Indonesia to Saudi Arabia, to Arabia. I mean, there is no Saudi in, at the time it's still Hijaz, not Saudi. Yeah. So the next point is, so what actually the reasons for traveling, for migration? For Arab who traveled, who migrated to Malay-Indonesian archipelago, they're mostly driven by, I think, economic activities might be, residing, trade, and occasionally for da'wah or Islamic propagations. Professor Angsang can help me what exactly the Arab reason for coming to Malay-Indonesian archipelago. And for Indonesian who visited Hijaz at the time was mainly for religious issues. For Hajj maybe, for Hajj pilgrimage, for conducting religious activities and so forth, and also for Islamic learning. So there's some group of scholar in Indonesia, group of Indonesian scholar in Hijaz, in Haramain at the time, which is I'm going to talk for the moment. And this is very, there were many influential scholars which I'm going to talk now. This is part of the connection between Arabia and Indonesia. So to prove the long connection between Arab and Indonesia, in Mecca there is a district called Kampung Jawa. So Kampung Jawa is very well known. If you visited Mecca, so it is easy to recognize Kampung Jawa or Jawi. The Arabic word for Jawi also had been very well known long since the past centuries. People of Arabia already know about Jawa or Al-Jawi. This is just another proof of the strong connection between Arabia and Al-Jawi. Actually is not refer. The word Jawi doesn't refer to Java or Javanese, Javanese, but Jawi at the time is referred to, I think, Southeast Asian more broadly, including Singapore, Malaysia, southern Thailand, and of course today's Indonesia. So this is just a background about the long contacts, the long relationship between Arabia and Indonesia. Arabia, again, I'd like to emphasize, Arabia here is southern Arabia and also northern part of Arabia. So now I'm going to move on the Islamic scholar or ulama in Saudi, in Arabia or in Saudi Arabia. As long as if you are familiar with the scholarship of Indonesian Islam, especially in the Middle East or Arab, so you will be familiar with the connection between Egypt, Arabia, and so on and so forth. Because in the past, there were many many Islamic scholars of ulama actually, who learned Islam, studied Islam, not only learned and studied, but also they were teaching Islam, especially in Hijaz, in Haramain, in Mecca, and Medina. So historically, Mecca, Haramain, or Hijaz, in addition to Egypt, has been strong, has been the main the main center of Islamic learning for Indonesians. So for for Indonesian scholars who travel and studied in Mecca, actually we can divide it into three or two stages. Yeah, the first stage is actually from the 17th until 18th century. So already in the 17th until 18th century, already Indonesian Islamic scholar already resided in Mecca, in Hijaz. So the very famous name here, I mentioned here, for instance, Nuruddin Araniri, for instance, Abdul Rauf Singkili, and then Yusuf Al-Makassari, Shamsuddin Sumatrani, Hamzah Famsuri, Muhammad Arshad Al-Banjari, Abdul Samad Al-Palembani, and so on and so forth. So the great group of scholars of Indonesian Islamic scholars who learned, studied Islam in Mecca and became the main intellectual network of Arabia and Indonesia from 17th until 18th centuries. And then this is the book I mentioned here is written by Professor Azumardi Azra. He is perhaps the most famous historian of Indonesian Islam. And Professor Azra is actually the best of my knowledge. He is the first Indonesian historian who tried to write about the connection between Hijaz and Indonesia. But Professor Azumardi Azra's focus here is focused actually particularly in reformist intellectual network. So Professor Azra didn't mention about Sufi connection, for instance. Heterodox Muslims groups, for instance, the connection between Arabia and Indonesia, but because he mostly focused on the reformist network of Islam. So his main study is about Araniri, for instance, Sengkili, for instance, and it's about reformist Islam, the connection between reformist Islam in Arabia and Indonesia. So Professor Azra didn't highlight Sufi scholar, for instance, Hamzah Fansuri or Kiai Ahmad Mutamakin, for instance, because this is beyond his study. So I think it would be great if there is other scholar who try to complement Professor Azumardi Azra's studies, not only look at the connection, the reformist connection, but also traditionalist connection, Sufi connections between Arabia and Indonesia. So actually my book project now I am working on at May, actually to some degree is actually a continuation of Professor Azra's work. But mine is not only focused on reformist grouping, reformist scholars, Islamic scholars, but also traditionalist Islamic scholar, Sufi scholar, and so on and so forth, to try to continue Professor Azra's network. So next point is so the first stage of Indonesian Islamic scholar in Mecca is between 17th until 18th century. So the second stage is actually between 19th until 20th century. So I call this is the golden age of Indonesian Islamic scholar in Mecca. The hundreds of Indonesian Islamic scholars in Hijaz, in Haramain, during this period. There's many. So I gathered data in the last 2 years together one by one. So the very impressive Indonesian Islamic scholar in Hijaz, in Haramain. So the picture here is actually one of the group of Indonesian Islamic scholar in Mecca, and in the center is Sheikh Yasin bin Isa Al-Fadani from Padang of Sumatra. I call him the last great Indonesian Islamic scholar in Mecca, because after he died in 1990, so there is no longer Indonesian Islamic scholar in Mecca that can be compared with him. So he was a truly great ulama. He was one of the founder of Darul Ulum, the first Indonesian school in Mecca. So he wrote so many books. Some people say 97 books has been written by Sheikh Yasin bin Isa Al-Fadani. He died in Mecca also. He was the last. If I make a database here for Indonesian ulama in Hijaz, for instance, like Muhammad Nawawi Al-Bantani. So this is a confusing name. Muhammad Nawawi bin Umar Al-Bantani. Don't be confused with Imam Nawawi Al-Bantani, Imam Nawawi Al-Nawa. So there is a difference. Imam Nawawi Nawa Al-Dimashqi is the 13th century of Islamic scholar. So Imam Nawawi Al-Bantani is a 19th Islamic scholar who was born in Banten in West Java, not in Nawa, in Syria, in Damascus. But the problem is, I checked sometime in the Western library, for instance, if we type Nawawi, so the first image in the system, Imam Nawawi al-Dimashqi, not Imam Nawawi al-Bantani. So there are many books that actually had been written by Imam Nawawi al-Bantani, and it became Imam Nawawi al-Dimashqi. So this is very confusing. This might be because Indonesian Islamic scholar is not really well known in the Western academia. So when they mention Imam Nawawi, it's always Imam Nawawi Nawa al-Dimashqi, not Imam Nawawi al-Bantani. Well, actually, the father of Imam Nawawi al-Bantani, he admired Imam Nawawi Nawa. He wished if he had sons, so he would like to give name Nawawi. So this is why he became Imam Nawawi, but have nothing to do with Imam Nawawi at Dimashqi, Imam Nawawi from Syria, actually. But anyway, so he is one of the greatest Islamic scholar ulama, Indonesian ulama in Hijaz. Actually, some said he was not only teaching in Mecca, in the Haram Mosque or in Masjid al-Haram, but also he was a very prolific scholar who wrote books in many topics, in hadith, in Islamic law, in many topics, and some of his books had been taught in many Islamic boarding schools in Indonesia, actually. So he was truly great ulama, Indonesian ulama in Hijaz. He died in Mecca also. And the second is Ahmad Khatib Minangkabau. Ahmad Khatib Minangkabau is also, he was truly a great ulama also from Sumatra, who was also prolific scholar also, like Imam Nawawi, who also not only teacher or writer, but also imam in the Haram Mosque, which has been appointed by Hijazi ulama at the time to be imam in Haram Mosque. So Muhammad Nawawi al-Bantani, Ahmad Khatib Minangkabau, Kiai Mahfud Termas. He is one of the greatest Indonesian Javanese ulama also in Hijaz. Kiai Mahfud has been phenomenal here because he wrote also so many books, and Ki Mahfud actually has become one of the main network of Indonesian ulama, and Ki Mahfud is actually become the main figure of a Indonesian scholar who tried to introduce pesantren across the Indonesia, and many founders of pesantren actually the students of Ki Mahfud actually, including Ki Hasim Ash'ari and others. Ki Hasim Ash'ari was the founder of a Nahdlatul Ulama, Indonesia's largest Islamic organization. Actually, the students of Ki Mahfud also. There are many. Ki Abdul Hamid bin Muhammad Ali Al-Qudsi, Muhammad Yasin bin Isa Al-Fadani, I already mentioned before. Muhammad Ukhud bin Idris Al-Bukhuri from Bogor in West Java. Abdullah Durdum Al-Fadani from Padang. Abdul Ghani Al-Bimawi from Bima. There are many. I cannot mention them all here. But if you would like to read the biography of all of this and then read my books next year, not now. I'm not finished yet. So so I tried together to document social intellectual biography of all of these great scholars. But interestingly, correct me if I'm wrong. There is no single book that talking about their contributions in Mecca, in Hijaz, except some of the in English. I'm talking about in books about the role of Indonesian ulama in Mecca in English, not in Indonesian. There's some in Indonesians, but there is no single book so far in English. It's quite interesting, not because. Yes, it's interesting because they have in the past they made a really great contribution, not only for Islamic education but also for the spread of Sufism, traditional Islam, reformist Islam, and so on and so forth. So that's in the past. So I'm talking about. The first stage is between 17th, 18th century, and then second stage is from 19th until 20th century. And all of them is Islamic scholars or ulama. And the question is, how about now? Is there any Indonesian ulama in Hijaz? Is there any Indonesian Islamic scholars in Hijaz? The question is yes, but only few. It's only maybe 3 or 4, maybe. It's difficult for me to find. I found some of them, but we cannot compare their contribution, their role with the previous ulama, of course. The first is Dr. Ahmad Fahmi. He teaches now in Madrasah Saulatiyah in Mecca. I'm going to talk about Madrasah Saulatiyah later. And then Ustadzah Soraya is a woman who teach in Taiba University in Medina. And then the next is Ustadz Firanda. This is very young scholar. He teach in Nabawi Mosque in Medina. And most interesting thing with Firanda is he is a student of Sheikh Abdul Razak bin Abdul Muhsin Al-Abad, and Abdul Muhsin Sheikh Abdul Razak is actually very influential ulama in Saudi Arabia, and Sheikh Abdul Razak is actually the son of Abdul Muhsin Al-Abad, and Abdul Muhsin Al-Abad is actually one of the founder of Islamic University in Medina. So the connection between Firanda and his teacher Sheikh Abdul Razak is very strong, because this is through the connection of Firanda. Actually, Sheikh Abdul Razak came to Indonesia and give some sermon in some places in Indonesia. It's actually this is the connection between Firanda and Sheikh Abdul Razak. It is through Sheikh Abdul Razak actually that Firanda also can teach it Nabawi Mosque, actually, because his connection with Sheikh Abdul Razak. So we are going to talk more detail about the differences between the past and the present Islamic scholar in Saudi Arabia. So next, I'm going to little bit faster. So the first is about Islamic scholar. We already talked about Islamic scholar, about ulama, about Islamic scholar. So now we move to the next of next group, which is we call it scientists. So in this group, we call it scientists here as they do not teach Islam. They teach hard sciences. Some of them teach chemistry, physics, math, aerospace, computer sciences, and so forth, including me. I am an anthropologist, teaching anthropology and sociology. So this is the picture of my colleague. It's all Indonesians scientists. None of them teaching Islam, but had been very. If you can recognize me, this is me. That's a great number of not many, but most Indonesian now teach in Saudi is not teaching Islam. So we can question why. So because we can raise question why no longer Indonesian Islamic scholar in Hijaz, in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia. This is have strong connection with the Saudi policy in education and religious education and so forth. So we talk. We can raise question later on. And the next point is I'm going to mention here. There's great differences between contemporary scientists and Islamic scholars in the past, not only for reasons for coming to Saudi Arabia, but also for motive and so forth. So there are some great differences between social scientists now and Islamic scholar in the past. So we can compare both group, but I already talked with some of them, not only in Bahrain but also in Riyadh, in Jeddah, and so forth, for the reasons and motive, objective for coming to Saudi. There are many reasons. From religious to secular. So the combination of religious and secular reasons had been very strong in contemporary scientists who teach in Saudi Arabia. This is completely different from the past, where Islamic scholar in the past had nothing to do with secular motive of finding economy, jobs, and so forth. It's completely different. So. Almost there was no secular reasons for Islamic scholar in the past for teaching in Masjidil Haram or Masjid Nabawi in Medina. So okay, we can raise questions. If you have any question about scientists, I'm very happy to answer about their motive, about their network, and so on and so forth. So next group, this is the last group, is students. So this is Indonesian students in Saudi Arabia. And the most interesting thing is, in the past centuries, most Indonesian students, they studied in the mosque, in houses. Houses belong to sheikh, ulama. They studied in madrasah, yes, of course. In informal Islamic learning centers, but for today, most Indonesian Muslims studied in Saudi Arabia. They're mostly in universities, in colleges, in universities. There's some of them in Ma'had. Ma'had is like Islamic boarding school somehow. There's some of them studied in Ma'had Sayyid Muhammad Alwi al-Maliki, for instance, in Mecca. This is very famous. And Ma'had Shah Ismail in Mecca also. and also Ma'had Habib Zain bin Smith. Smith actually is Sumaith, yeah, and then it becomes, I don't know why Sumaith and then becomes Smith. It's Ma'had Habib bin Smith, actually Sumaith and not Smith. But people understand Smith. So Ma'had Habib Zain bin Smith in Medina. This Ma'had is actually they had been running for 15 years, but since the last 5 years it's been closed down by Saudi government because of you know the answer why it's closed down. Some of these some of these Ma'had is actually not declare. Some of them underground in Mecca and Medina. It's not yeah, because the ideological differences between the Ma'had, between Islam has been practiced understood by the Ma'had and then the Saudi government. So Sayyid Muhammad Alwi al-Maliki has become the very famous Ma'had in Mecca. He was already died, and now is his son Ahmad, Sayyid Ahmad bin Muhammad Alwi al-Maliki, who ran the Ma'had in Mecca. And it's about I think about 40 or 50 Indonesian students every year. They come to Mecca. Even though many people would like to study, many Indonesian students would like to study under Sayyid Ahmad or Sayyid Muhammad al-Maliki, but he is very strict in selecting Indonesian students, mostly through individual networks. For instance, between the connection between Ki Maimun Zubair in Sarang, for instance, he sends students regularly to this Ma'had because there is a individual connection between Ki Maimun Zubair and Sayyid Muhammad Alwi al-Maliki. And also as for Islamic university, so there in Saudi there are some universities in Saudi that have become home base of Indonesian students. Most of them studied in Islamic university in Medina. I think it's about 1,000 students, Indonesian students in Islamic university in Medina. Most of them studied Islam with different faculties. Some of them studied Islamic law. Some of them studied hadith, tafsir hadith. Some of them studied theology, usuluddin. Some of them studied, but most of them, all of them studied Islamic law in Islamic University of Medina, and also Ummul Qura, and then Imam Muhammad bin Saud Islamic University. This is interesting university because Imam Muhammad bin Saud Islamic University, this university has a branches in Jakarta, also in Indonesia. So, and then King Saud University, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, and my university, King Fahad University of Petroleum and Minerals. But students now in Saudi, they're not only studying Islam, but many of them studying secular sciences, as I mentioned before, of physics, chemistry, computer, and so on and so forth. So interesting to see, to note here that as long as I know that Indonesian students who studied in Saudi Arabia, through the most of them, if not all of them, through the scholarship that provided by Saudi government or individuals or social agencies in Saudi Arabia, not provided by Indonesian government. Interesting, because Indonesian government under the religious ministry, actually they have huge scholarship program, but they do not send Indonesian students to Saudi Arabia. They send to Morocco, the University of Qarawiyyin in Fez in Morocco. They sent to University of Khartoum in Sudan. Some of them in Yemen, of course, and many of them in Turkey, but none of them in Saudi Arabia. So students who studied in Saudi Arabia, mostly under the scholarship that had been provided by Saudi government or Saudi universities or Saudi individuals. Just like Syed Muhammad al-Maliki, who he financed himself, a student who studied under Indonesian student who studied in Mecca in his mahad, all of them free. So that and Syed Muhammad al-Maliki, they give stipend every month to students. They provide money to students. So all Indonesian students actually free studying Islam in his ma'had in Mecca. So they provide housing, provide stipend, provide and so on and so forth. But they have to study at least 4 or 6 years. They cannot go home until they finish the study in Ma'had Syed Muhammad al-Maliki. So it's interesting to discuss further about why the Indonesian government do not provide scholarship for Indonesian students who study Islam. But to those who studied non-Islamic sciences, they give money. For instance, LPDP, or what is the program by LPDP? Yes, LPDP under the economy ministry, is that right? Finance ministry. They have scholarship for Indonesian students to send Indonesian students to Saudi Arabia, but not in Islamic sciences. They studied in hard sciences, in others, not in Islamic disciplines. LPDP, yes, LPDP. What is the I don't know. A huge. That's it. Yes, Indonesian Indo Fund. Yeah, they have a huge scholarship for Indonesian students, right, to study abroad. But as long as for Islamic studies, they do not send students to to Saudi. They send students who would like to study Islam in Turkey and other places, but not to Saudi. And okay, so I think students is the last point. So we as I promised, we give more. What is the last? Okay, what is the last? Okay, last is about yes, Indonesian school. I think this is last or not? Oh yes, almost. Indonesian school, very brief. Indonesian school in Mecca. The first Indonesian school in Mecca, we call it Darul Ulum. It's actually, the school has been founded in 1934. It is the first Indonesian school in Mecca. And the founders of the school is included here is Sayyid Muhsin bin Ali al-Musawa from Palembang, and then K. Abdullah Muhaimin from Lasem, and Shah Yasin bin Isa from Padang, and Zubair bin Ahmed from Penang, Malaysia, actually. So the combination between Malay, Indonesian, Malay at the time, and they established Madrasah Darul Ulum. And the reason for the founding of Darul Ulum, because there was a conflict between Indonesian teachers and students of Madrasah Saulatia. Madrasah Saulatia is actually the famous madrasah in Mecca, where many Indonesian Islamic students studied. Actually, before the establishment of Madrasah Darul Ulum, most Indonesians studied in the Madrasah of Saulatia. When Madrasah Saulatia was established in 1874 by the I think Saulatul Nisa, I think the Indian woman, a business woman, she established Madrasah Saulatia and became very famous for Indonesian, and most Indonesians studied in Madrasah Saulatia. But after the conflict and tension between Indonesian teachers and students who taught and studied in Madrasah Saulatia, and after the tensions and conflict, and then they began to establish their own school and called Madrasah Darul Ulum. The tension is actually at the time that because non-Indonesian teacher and students in Madrasah Saulatia, they say that Malay language cannot be used as an instruction in discussion, in writing, in conversation about Islam, because Malay language is not religious language. Well, Malay language is not sacred language. So the debate between the use of Malay language in Madrasah Saulatiyah, this is and the debate has become the foundation, and made many Malay-Indonesian at the time became angry with the Madrasah Saulatiyah teacher at the time, and they began to establish their own school that use Malay language as an instructions. And so this is a tension between, and the reason why they were angry at the time, that because Malay language at the time has become the main language for Malay-Indonesian, because it's a nationalist language, because it's a language of nationalism to unite all Indonesian and Malay against the Dutch at the time. So when the Malay language has become very powerful, very strong, become main identity of Indonesian and Malay in Hijaz at the time. So this is the reasons for the establishment of Madrasah Darul Ulum in Mecca. So the second madrasah, we call it Madrasah Indonesia Al-Makkiyah. So he established in 1947 by Janan Muhammad Toyib and Muhammad Nur Salim Al-Khalidi. So, but the madrasah is closed down now. Madrasah Darul Ulum had been transformed to Saudi school. No longer exists because it's been transformed to Saudi school. The most interesting thing is, based on my notes, is there were some female schools that had been established by Indonesians at the time. There's female school. Actually, this is very interesting point. A female school. I noted there are 3 female schools in Mecca. The first is Madrasah Khuttab Al-Banat. It's been established by Nyai Khairiyah Hasim. Nyai Khairiyah Hasim is the daughter of Sheikh Hashim Ash'ari, who was the founder of Nahdlatul Ulama, Indonesian, as I mentioned before, Indonesia's largest Islamic organization. So she established a female school in Mecca called Madrasah Khuttab Al-Banat in 1942. And the second is Jam'iyah Khairiyah. It is established in 1957 by Siti Aminah. This is the wife of Shah Yasin bin Isa al-Fadani. And the third female school is Madrasah Ibtidaiyah lil Banat al-Ahliyat. So this is founded by Shah Yasin himself. And this is interesting because female school is not very common at the time, because school is mostly for men, it's not for women. But they initiated to establish establishing female school is very interesting point in this case. And the next school for Indonesian is there are some of them Sekolah Indonesia Mecca, Taman Pendidikan Al-Quran Nasriyah, Sekolah Indonesia Jeddah. But this is not. This is mostly for elementary school. For secondary elementary school, is not really. The point is, I made it is a conclusion to my conclusion for this discussion, for the talk this afternoon. The first conclusion is the fate of Saudi's Indonesian school in Mecca and Hijaz is some survive, some collapse. Some have been transformed into Saudi government school. Saudization and Saudi educational policy have made Indonesian school difficult to survive. For instance, all schools should follow Saudi curricula. For instance, all schools should be under Saudi name. Not only Indonesian, those who foreign national live in Saudi, they cannot establish their own school or business enterprises and so on. Should be under Saudi name, not by. So, for instance, if I would like to establish school in Saudi, I should have partner of Saudi partner. So the name should be under the Saudi, not under mine. So this is the more. And then the school should pay should be the one who, for instance, is Pak Engseng. Pak Engseng, for instance, imagine Pak Engseng, for instance, is a Saudi. And then I would like to build an Indonesian school in Mecca, and I include Pak Engseng to be one of the founders, and the school should be under the Pak Engseng's name, not by my name, just name. But I have to pay Pak Engseng every month, and so on and so forth. It's a good deal, yes. Because if not, I cannot establish education, or not only schools, but also all businesses. If you would like to build barber shop, for instance, you cannot build under your name. It should be under Saudi name. And my name is okay, Al-Qurtuby. Al-Qurtuby is more or less like Saudi. So well, there are many Qurtuby in Saudi. It's close to my university. They are pharmacy, Al-Qurtuby pharmacy. They're very famous pharmacy actually, and it's close to my. So this is the problem. One not only for Indonesian actually, but also for all foreign who stayed in Saudi. They cannot establish a school or other businesses under their name. And the second is, as I mentioned before, all Indonesian who pursued in the past centuries, mostly they studied Islam, but now in the last decade they studied Islamic and secular sciences. And we can talk what is the difference between students who studied secular sciences and those who studied Islam in Saudi Arabia. Do they embrace some form of Salafism and so forth, or not? And so we can discuss and raise questions. And the next point is, in contemporary era, of course, there is strong influence of Wahhabism and Salafism. This is of course, no doubt about this. While in the past, Indonesian in the Haramain, they embrace multiple forms of Islam. Some of them philosophism, some of them reformism, traditionalism, modernism, and so forth. This is not the case in the modern era. Some Saudi alumni in recent years have been the main channel of the spread of Salafism and Puritanical Islam that in turn create tension and conflict with local Indonesian. Well, this is true in the development of today's Indonesian and alumni of Saudi institutions. Not only those who studied in Saudi, but also those who studied in Indonesia, in Indonesian branch of Saudi University, like Lipia in Jakarta, for instance. The graduate of this institution, mostly they become create tension and conflict with some local Indonesian because they have different views and understanding about how to practice and understand what Islam. And as I noticed before, there is no more influential Islamic scholar in Haramain, in Saudi in general, since the death of Sheikh Yassin bin Isa al-Fadani in 1990. And then the reasons for the reason for why there is no more Islamic scholar in Haramain in Saudi is very clear. Because regime change, policy change, educational policy change. In the past century, for instance, there is more freedoms of studying Islam in Haramain, in particular in Mecca, in Medina. So in the past, there are many Sufis, there are many Muslims who followed not only Hanbali but also Shafi'i, Maliki, and so forth. They're free to study Islam from different madhab, from different madhab, from different Islamic streams, different schools. So Syekh Ahmad Khatib Sambas, they established Tareqa, Sufi order, Naqshbandiyah, Qadiriyah, Naqshbandiyah, they established in Medina. Because at the time there is no, Sufi can develop, Tareqa can develop in Mecca and Medina under the Ottoman Empire, I think at the time, yes. But it's completely different since the Hijaz under the control of Saudi government. So the main reason is because regime change, policies change, So educational policies also change, everything's changed. Islamic education policy also begin to change. And by the changing the nature of in politics, in education, and so on and so forth, so that so now I think it's become more difficult for Indonesian Islamic scholar to teach Islam in Saudi Arabia. If there is Indonesian scholar, if there is Indonesian Islamic scholar who can teach in Saudi, they have to follow Salafism, Wahhabism, of course. Just like Ustaz Firanda and Ustazah Soraya, they strong defender of Wahhabism in contemporary era. So they teach in Masjid Nabawi. If Indonesian pilgrims come to Masjid Nabawi in Medina, and then they begin to indoctrinate them about Salafism, Wahhabism, and so on and so forth. So if we can teach in Saudi, in Islam, not in non-Islamic science, so we have to follow Salafism, Wahhabism. If not, I think there is no room for non-Wahhabi, non-Salafi ulama to teach Islam in Saudi. I think that's it. What I hope I can get more feedback, question, criticism from you all, and because I'm developing this until now, I'm still developing chapter of my book, and hoping that next year I can complete the first project, and then second project of my book actually about the influence of Indonesian of Saudi trained Indonesians in Indonesia. This is my second book project actually. That's it. Thank you so much, and